Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here because today we're diving into one of the most mind-blowing economic transformations in human history. We're going to unpack South Korea's 35-year economic master plan. It's essentially a series of 5-year blueprints that completely rewrote a nation's destiny.
Now, just think about this massive question for a second. How exactly does a nation rebuild from absolute ashes to become a global powerhouse in just 35 years? I mean, right after the Korean War ended in 1953, South Korea was totally devastated. They were heavily relying on U.S. economic aid just to keep their heads above water. But unfortunately, much of that early aid was largely mismanaged. It didn't build a sustainable industrial base, and the country got trapped in this vicious cycle of low investment and low production. So how do you even begin to fix a situation like that? Okay, let's dive into this, because this number right here is where everything changed. During their very first economic plan launched in the early 1960s, South Korea hit an 8.5% growth rate. They didn't just meet their goals, they totally smashed them, kickstarting what the entire world now calls the miracle on the Han River. To really make sense of how they pulled off this massive feat, we're going to break this highly organized history down into 5 distinct eras. First, ruins to a master plan. Then, the engine of growth. Number 3, heavy industry and oil. 4, the shift to social welfare. And finally, the final plans and legacy. All right, let's jump right into section 1, ruins to a master plan, which covers the era right up to 1962. To set the scene, the 1950s and early 60s were incredibly turbulent politically. The early attempts at economic recovery under President Syngman Rhee and then Prime Minister Chang Myon basically failed to launch. There was just too much political instability and public unrest, including the April Revolution. Then, in May 1961, Park Chung-hee took power via a military coup. And it was actually his government that finally implemented the first 5-year plan in 1962. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer power of this new central agency, the Economic Planning Institute, or EPI. Formed in 1961, this brain trust wasn't just some advisory committee. It employed hundreds of experts and was led by a deputy prime minister, often referred to as the economic vice president. They essentially directed the entire national economy, overseeing major ministries like finance, trade, and science. I mean, they were the true architects driving the whole machine. And their core strategy? It was a massive pivot. They completely abandoned the old concept of balanced growth and waiting around for foreign aid. Instead, they adopted this directed capitalist system. Essentially, the government took the wheel, forcefully guiding the private sector. The whole goal was unbalanced growth, laser-focused on rapid industrialization, and racking up foreign exchange through a relentless export drive. Which leads us perfectly into section 2, the engine of growth, covering the 1960s. For the first and second 5-year plans running from 1962 to 1971, it was really all about sheer survival and sparking that initial takeoff. They urgently prioritized developing basic energy sources, things like electricity and coal. They expanded infrastructure and made a huge push to shift from primary agriculture into secondary, light manufacturing for exports. And this brilliantly illustrates how well that scientific, highly formulated planning actually worked. They were using complex input-output models to set their targets. For the first plan, they aimed for 7.1%, but hit 8.5%. For the second, they aimed for 7.0%, and actual growth exploded to 9.7%. The systematic planning meant their growth vastly and consistently exceeded the government's own expectations. And the tangible achievements during this time were just massive. By 1970, they opened the Gyeongbu Expressway, this vital artery connecting the entire country. Between 1965 and 1971, exports increased by an unbelievable 6.4 times. They normalized relations with Japan, and honestly, the industry got a huge boost from military demand during the Vietnam War. But it's worth noting there were some early warning signs too, like growing trade deficits and rising inflation due to their heavy dependence on imported raw materials. So they had to pivot again. Let's look at section 3, heavy industry and oil, covering the 1970s. The third plan had a really bold goal, becoming a moderately developed country. And this quote captures their dual-track mindset perfectly. Through the New Village movement, they really pushed to improve rural living standards and achieve food self-sufficiency, while at the exact same time pouring massive investments into heavy and chemical industrial scale. This era triggered a mind-boggling structural transformation. You can see agriculture's share of the economy dropping, while heavy industry skyrockets to make up 53% of the manufacturing sector by 1981. This is the decade that birthed the global giants we all know today. We're talking the completion of Pohang Steel, the massive Ulsan shipyard, and in 1975, the rollout of Hyundai's very first 90% localized brand car, the Pony. What's even crazier is the global context here. During the 1970s global oil crises, huge economies all around the world shrank. But South Korea, they kept growing at an average of over 10% during the third plan. How did they pull that off? Basically by aggressively securing Middle East construction contracts and just relentlessly driving their exports to bring foreign exchange back home. But we absolutely have to look at the full picture here. This heavy-handed, government-led sprint into heavy industry came with some severe socioeconomic costs. By the end of the 70s, South Korea was sitting on $32.5 billion in foreign debt, making them the world's fourth largest debtor nation. Wholesale inflation was averaging a painful 20%. Wealth inequality was widening, and by 1980, the economy actually hit a negative growth rate of negative 6.2%. The structural imbalance was reaching a breaking point. And that brings us to Section 4, the shift to social welfare in the 1980s. Following that intense economic chaos and the political assassination of President Park Chung-hee in 1979, the government really had to redefine its entire role. Let's move to and see how this builds into a totally new economic framework. So the first four plans were very directive. The government was controlling everything, focusing on dictating heavy industry. But starting in the 80s, the plans became inductive. The government actually stepped back, allowing free market competition and private sector autonomy to take the lead, while they shifted their own focus towards social welfare and technological innovation. And the stabilization they achieved in the 80s was incredible. They crushed that rampant 20% wholesale inflation down to an average of just 1%. In 1986, for the very first time in modern Korean history, investment was fully domestically funded. They weren't relying on foreign capital anymore. The country began transitioning toward democratic politics, and the basic framework of South Korea's social security system was born, featuring a minimum wage, national pension, and medical insurance. Oh, and of course, they hosted the 1988 Summer Olympics, really announcing their arrival on the world stage. By the late 1980s, the economy had matured so much, the tertiary, or service sector, was now making up over 60% of the economy. They achieved virtually full employment, with the unemployment rate dropping to just 2.3%. And manufacturing wasn't just about heavy steel anymore. It had rapidly shifted toward fine machinery, semiconductors, and electronics. Which finally brings us to Section 5, the final plans and legacy, the 1990s. In 1993, civilian President Kim Young-sam took office, officially ending 32 years of military rule. He actually scrapped the ongoing 7th five-year plan and introduced his own new economic five-year plan. His strategy focused heavily on easing those old administrative controls, pulling back the government's heavy hand, and rolling out massive anti-corruption reforms, like the financial real name system, to bring some real transparency to the markets. On paper, the results were just stunning. By 1995, South Korea's GDP hit $456 billion, ranking them 11th in the entire world. Import liberalization reached 99.9%. But there's a catch. There were deep, unresolved structural flaws, especially the immense power of the chaebols, or large conglomerates, overpowering small businesses alongside a fragile financial sector. Those vulnerabilities left them highly exposed, ultimately leading to the devastating 1997 Asian financial crisis. After that fallout, the subsequent president, Kim Dae-jung, officially ended the five-year plan system forever. So we have to ask ourselves this final question. South Korea's 35-year master plan undeniably created a modern miracle, dragging a completely devastated nation into global prominence through sheer willpower and rigid structure. But considering the unique historical context, the heavy authoritarian control, and the eventual painful financial reckoning, could a tightly controlled, government-led economic blueprint like this ever be replicated in today's highly complex, globalized free market? It's a fascinating thought to leave you with. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.